I am neurodivergent. And by saying that, I'm identifying myself as different, divergent. The term neurodivergent is defined by the Oxford English Dictionary as differing in mental or neurological functioning from what is considered typical or normal. And different is what you're often made to feel when you're neurodivergent. Growing up, I struggled in school because of my language and auditory processing issues and my ADHD. I had to work harder and study for longer than my classmates just to do well. I often felt discouraged and frustrated because I still wasn't doing as well as my classmates, even after all my efforts. So when I was diagnosed in 9th grade, I did feel that sense of relief people were talking about. If there was something wrong with me, then it wasn't my fault. I wasn't lazy. And that felt good, mostly. Because then, my diagnosis started being viewed as a problem. The doctor suggested going on ADHD medication, which can be super helpful for some people. For me, though, it would just be a way to do better in school, and it felt weird to put something in my body just to get better grades. It felt like there was something wrong with me, and then once it was fixed, I would be this normal I kept hearing about. A similar situation happened to my brother, who was diagnosed with dyslexia when he was 6. After he got tested, it was suggested that he too go on medication and switch from his current school to go to a school specialized for kids with dyslexia. Like me, it was suggested he had to change. He realized he was different than his friends. He realized he wasn't allowed to belong, but he didn't see anything wrong with himself. This situation got me thinking about how many kids there are like me who either take the medication because their parents want to do better or don't take it, end up not doing well, and are dropping out of school, which can severely impact your future. So then I Googled how many people were in fact neurodivergent. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention found that in 2021, 15 to 20% of people had been diagnosed with a neurodivergence. Look to your left. There's a 1 in 5 chance that person is neurodivergent. 20 people in a math class, it's probable 4 people have been diagnosed with a neurodivergence. And that's just the people who have been diagnosed. Considering how hard and expensive it can be to get a diagnosis, this only identifies a small portion of neurodivergent people. So how come there's so many of us, yet it's us who have to change? We have to go on medication, we have to switch to a specialized school, we have to feel isolated, and we have to fit into the idea of this one type of brain. We are made to believe that we are at fault and that we need to change, when in reality, it's this education system that's at fault and that needs to change. And this education system isn't just annoying, but it alters lives. School is one of the biggest parts of our young adult existence. And struggling in your classes, being bullied, and being considered lazy can impact your life immensely. This is why so many neurodivergent people end up dropping out of school and or falling into depression. A study done by the Center for Statistics found that 16% of the people who served under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act had dropped out of high school in 2019 to 2020. Another study found that in the 86 days leading to the COVID-19 lockdown, that a quarter of the people who committed suicide during that time had been diagnosed with ADHD or autism. This can no longer be. We have to take action to change this education system that has been playing against us. Judy Singer, an Australian sociologist who coined the word neurodiversity, the origin of the word neurodivergent, saw neurodiversity as a beautiful thing, not as something negative. Singer spent much of her life studying neurodivergent students and families, and had empathy for the teasing, mocking, and discrimination they faced in education and the workplace. She imagined a world where they weren't forced to perform in ways in which they simply were not wired. Singer modeled her word after the word biodiversity, because biodiversity is essential to the ecosystem, and so is neurodiversity. Neurodivergent people are important for society to work. We've all heard the expression, 2 minds are better than 1. Singer created this word and this movement to show that the differences in the brain can bring us great success, and that we need to change this education system in order that all brains can be valued. Singer created this revolutionary idea that said that the difference in the brain is what can create a beautiful society. So this is where it's get complicated. We understand that the education system needs to change, so it doesn't just cater to one type of learning and stop singling out neurodivergent people. But how can we change an education system that's been in place for decades? Well, there are ways that we can change this problematic system we live in without going full on blank slate. A simple way to do this is by modifying aspects of traditional schools in order to work on creating a more safe, supportive, and respectful environment for all types of learning. For one, teachers can use positive reinforcement in the classroom to encourage more students to participate. Secondly, educators can repeat students' thoughts and use their body language in order to create a more accommodating environment. Schools can also work on giving multiple ways of learning because no 2 students learn the same way. For example, many students learn math better when it's taught to them, and a lot of other students learn better when reading an article on their own. Most importantly, schools should prioritize recognizing each student's strengths and talents. Neurodivergent people have special strengths that, when noticed and appreciated by their teachers and peers, will help them thrive in the classroom. Educators can play into and highlight these strengths and talents in order to enhance students' learning experiences. Another method of reforming the education system is by experimenting with unconventional types of schools. Example of this type of education reform are microschools. Microschools are small, community-based learning environments that offer personalized education to their students. These schools have 10 to 15 students and are taught by passionate educators eager to create a unique learning environment. Microschools come in many different flavors. For example, classical education, arts and culture, language immersion, STEM, project-based, and even student-led. There are around 125,000 microschools in the United States today, serving approximately 1.5 million students. These schools are more focused on students rather than systems and cater their classes to their students. An example of this is that the head of a microschool is called a learning guide because rather than transmitting information, their role is to really develop these students into learners. Another type of popular school system in the moment are forest schools, which use experimental nature-centric learning. There are around 800 forest schools in the United States today. In forest schools, classes taught primarily outside of the classroom. These schools are focused on the holistic development of their participants, whether that is physical, emotional, intellectual, or social development. These schools also have a strong explorative element to them and teach traditional classes, just taught outdoors. Microschools and forest schools are amazing alternatives to traditional schools for neurodiverse students and, to be honest, for anyone. These schools cater their classes to their students, playing on their strengths and challenges, and offer individualized attention to each student. These schools give a lot of support and make sure that every student is engaged and that no one is falling behind. These schools also teach communication-based learning and emotional regulation. So you must be thinking, this is great, but what can I do to help? Well, there are many ways that people can better support neurodivergent students and be better allies. For one, educate yourself about specific neurodivergences. Not only will you understand the needs and behaviors of neurodivergent people more, but you avoid being influenced by the stigmas and misconceptions about them. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Secondly, steer clear from judgment on how their brains work. Try to be compassionate and have understanding. Finally, get involved with your school system. Whether you are a student, whether you are a parent, you can make a difference. And it shouldn't just be on neurodivergent families, because these ideas to strengthen our education system based on students' brains benefit everyone, whether or not you have been diagnosed with a neurodivergence. Here, I presented ways that schools and people can change in order to accommodate a wider range of brains and learning abilities. This idea that Judy Singer contributed to, that us humans all have different brains and that they should be utilized, is extraordinary and requires change to accommodate this realization. Through Singer's ideas, we can see that neurodiversity is essential to our biodiversity and that we need neurodivergent people for society to work, and that we should no longer be viewed as a problem. We should not feel obligated to go on medication or go to specialized school just to learn like everybody else. We need to change by modifying traditional schools and individualizing our education in order to benefit all students and brains. We need to change by taking ideas from microschools and forest schools in order to implement new learning methods. We need to change by modifying our actions on an individual level, by trying to understand neurodivergences better. The statistics of neurodivergent people who face bullying need to change, who end up dropping out of school need to change, and who end up committing suicide need to change. We are 1/5 of the population, and this change needs to happen now. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.